Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon. Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman podcast. Today you'll meet Sequoyah Branham, a ranch girl, storyteller, and passionate advocate for the honest beauty and heartbreak of ranch life. Raised in a tight-knit ranching community in West Texas, Sequoyah brings her lived experiences in the saddle and on the land into the pages of her writing. In our conversation today, she shares how working with livestock built her confidence, how an early love of writing blossomed on an online forum, and how her education in writing and business gave her the tools to bring her stories to life. We dive into the themes in her books like courage, connection, and learning to ask for help, and the realities of being a young woman navigating both agriculture and authorship. Sequoyah's story is a heartfelt reminder that rural life offers not only grit and challenge, but also profound moments of growth, learning, and beauty. Whether you are a fellow writer, rancher, or love a good story, this is one you do not want to miss. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's interview with Sequoyah. Sequoyah, welcome to the Rural Woman podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
I am so excited to get to dive into your story and learn more about you and the incredible young rural woman you are. So for the listeners who are unfamiliar with you, give us your background, tell us who you are, where you're from, and how you got your start in agriculture.
Yeah, I'm Sequoyah Branham. I'm a ranch girl and an author. I was born and raised in the ranching community. My family's been in ranching for several generations, mainly just my family working on ranches for other people. But yeah, I was privileged to get to grow up in that and help my dad and a couple of uncles on the places they were at as I was growing up. And that varied from kind of the rolling plains between Lubbock and Abilene. It's where I grew up most of my years. And then further West Texas, south of Midland, Odessa, that direction, whenever I was helping my uncles. So I've gotten to kind of travel around, and it's been a lot of fun.
So growing up, being able to be immersed in this ranching culture in West Texas, to me sounds very dreamy. Tell us more about the types of ranches that you were exposed to.
Yeah, so as I was growing up, my dad had a town job during the week, and then on the weekends he took care of a small place. And so that was just cow-calf pairs, and then my mom and sisters and I would feed or check waters for him in the middle of the week, and then I would go with him on the weekend, and that was when we got horseback and did all the stuff that needed to be done in that way. Those cattle were very calm and quiet and easy to handle. And so they did a lot for me, building my confidence and just helping me get to where I got excited about when something ran off. They were a little less intimidating. And then as I was growing up, my dad and I would go back to where he grew up, and his younger brother was managing the place that they actually all grew up on. And so that was primarily a sheep ranch. They did have some goats and a few cattle as well. And that was another place that really grew my confidence because sheep were a lot less intimidating. And those were long days, big country, bigger than up here where I grew up. And definitely has some, personally don't call them mountains, but some pretty good hills with some cliffs and canyons and stuff like that. And so that grew my riding confidence a lot as well, of just like I can go places and do things horseback and not be so uptight and worried all the time. And then almost done with high school when I started helping a different uncle, same general area, and it was a cattle ranch, and most of those cattle were not cool, calm, and collected. They took off at a high rate of speed when they saw us coming. So the Lord sure knew what he was doing, that I had experiences in other places before I got there, because I might have not stuck around very long if that was what I first encountered. But it came to be where that was a lot of fun to, kind of get into a little horse race with a cow and things like that.
I love that. And like you said, you built your confidence on horseback, because as a person who myself, my horse experience is taking like a guided trail ride through mountains, which is beautiful, but it's absolutely nothing like working on a horse and wrangling animals, whether it's a cow or a sheep or anything like that. So good for you, and good for you for building that confidence. Growing up, like having these experiences, how did this shape like what you eventually wanted to do?
Yeah, I think it definitely narrowed down the kinds of things that I wanted to do. I just love the outdoors. And so I was like, even if I don't have a ranch job or, can't work directly with animals, like just being outdoors, that was kind of my first criteria of an ideal life, is being outdoors as much as I can. And then as I began to write stories, it was just very natural of like, that was the setting, on a ranch, and working livestock. And I always kind of like had a theme of, this is what I want my characters to learn and kind of understand by the end of the story. And so it was just like, okay, what on the ranch is happening that makes them learn that? And I think agriculture as a whole, I only have experience with ranching, but I definitely would say agriculture as a whole provides plenty of opportunities to learn life lessons and just, character traits and things like that.
For sure. You make my job easy going into the books and being an author. When did you start writing? Is this something that you've always done?
It began in middle school. I've always been a big reader and stumbled upon a website that was just like basically a forum for people sharing their stories. And I started reading that, and I was kind of like, okay, if these people can do it, why can't I? Because there's a lot of really unedited, like, there's not even a period at the end of the sentence kind of stories on there. So I was like, if they can do it, why can't I? And so I just started writing for fun and, set my stories on the ranch, and usually gave my characters courage and skills that I didn't have, but I wanted to have. And so just kind of went from there, and then joined a college alternative program for novel writing and business. And I would say that's when I started gaining the skills and the confidence writing wise to think about like, not just I want to publish someday, but I can publish, and I can do that, within the next few years.
Very cool. Did you have any inspiration or any writers that you looked up to that their stories were, something that you aspired to write like?
Yes, for sure. Elmer Kelton, I think the Western Writers of America Association named him the best Western writer of all time. I think that's the title they gave him. But I really admired the way that he wrote Westerns, but they weren't the classic, like, shoot 'em up Hollywood Western. He brought in the characters and the land to like come together and just mesh really seamlessly. And both of them mattered to the story. And it mattered, there was a emotional element for the characters. It wasn't just, I have to keep my land or, whatever the story was. And just did such a good job of meshing those two together. And all of his writing was super real. As a, someone who understands that life and has lived that life, you can pick up one of his books and know that he understood that life very intimately, which is just so comforting when you can pick up a story and you know that the writer knows what your life is like.
I love that you said that, and the comforting part. That's a perfect word for it, because as you know, and anyone who's living rurally, there's a lot of things that are different than living in a major city center or even like a mid-sized town. Rural living is a different way of life. There's pros and cons to each side of the coin here, but to find stories that resonate with you, comforting. I love that adjective for it. It's perfect. You can help support the stories of women in agriculture to be shared through the Rural Woman podcast on Patreon. What is Patreon? It's a membership-based platform that helps fund and support creators like me to create and produce content like this that you all love. New to the Rural Woman podcast Patreon is ad-free listening and patron-only bonus content and exclusive episodes. Learn more and join the patron gang today at patreon.com/The Rural Woman Podcast. So you took this course, the business writing course. Tell me what that was like and what you've been able to do with that education piece that you've what did you learn in school?
So the Author Conservatory is a 3-year program. The first year focuses on craft and story structure. And then as you get into year 2, a little bit more on the platform and more of how do you connect with your readers specifically. And then year 3 is more publishing and that kind of thing. And so it really just builds on each other. And then the business track of it is all about you launch your own business and you learn how to market and what does that look like. And you get to see the real results of I made money by selling something, which is a very, very intimidating. Grew a lot of courage through that too, of just I can do hard things and I can talk to people and I don't die. And so, yeah, I learned a ton of practical business skills. I learned a ton of practical, what does a story look like and that kind of thing. But I also just grew so much as a person of knowing how to connect with people outside of a business relationship, knowing how to push through some of those, this is intimidating, this is scary, on another level of what does that actually look like? And specifically with people and with talking to people, because that's definitely been one of my big places that I think in some ways comes with rural living. You don't see as many people as often. And so when it comes to, kind of those big encounters, it's this is uncomfortable. But I just learned so much in all areas. And it was through them that I got my first professional edit on my first book in the Company of Cows. And that was a very mental unlocking section where I was okay, this person is getting paid to tell me what I'm doing wrong. And they told me that it's worthy of publication.
Honestly, when I think of the editing piece is always the most stressful part for me. And especially if I've put my creative prowess into something and then to give it over to someone for them to tell me what I did wrong is the biggest intimidation piece for me. I always, I love a good edit. Take out the words, take out the fluff, because I am definitely more of a theoretical talker versus getting to the point. So from that editing piece, then you were able to go to publication. So talk about your published work.
Yeah, so I have 2 books out now. They are in a series together called the Nora Kelly series. In the Company of Cows, Nora is really facing losing her job, which has become her whole world, and enlists the help of her uncle, who's very successful in kind of everything she wants to be. And so she's facing a lot of fear and exercising a lot of courage through that. And then in between pastures, it's kind of her turn to help him. He's battling cancer, and so she's trying to keep up with her job, the cattle that he has, and then also just being there for him, and is really battling what does it mean to ask for help and just what that looks like. As people in agriculture, we're not very good at asking for help, and so she's facing that down.
I'm curious, with you had mentioned before the characters and the stories that you have written. In Nora, what are some of the things that relate to your story? And what are some of the things that, you wish you had that were Nora's?
Especially in the first book, In the Company of Cows, Nora faces a lot of social anxiety, putting herself out there. And so that was something that I've struggled with, and still it circles back, and I get hung up on it sometimes. Her confidence as far as in her abilities on the ranch sometimes come and go for me. So that's probably one thing that I pull from her, that I'm like, I wish that I could just show up and, be that confident. And then in both stories, her Uncle Ian is very heavily based on one of my uncles that I got to spend a lot of time with, and that really made a big impact on my life. And so in Between Pastures, his journey, I also got to support my uncle while he walked his cancer diagnosis. And so there's a lot more of the personal emotions that Nora deals with that I faced during that as well. I think she's forced to deal with them a little bit more all right now, whereas my process was a little bit more scattered out.
And like you said, the comfort piece of being able to talk about things that you've been through. And I'm sure your readers feel the same or similar, of knowing that, the author of this book has been through this. So she knows what she's talking about. She knows the triumphs of what it takes to run a cattle herd with different hurdles along the way, and whether that's the social anxiety piece, which my hands up to, I have social anxiety. People don't think because you talk into a microphone that you are socially awkward. I think we're the most socially awkward people. That's why we talk into microphones, not face to face with people. But just knowing that there's that piece in there that's of you. And I love that you had mentioned that the piece that a lot of people in agriculture struggle with is the asking for help. For you, is that something that you also struggle with?
It is. There's areas that I can ask for help pretty easily. But I would say specifically with, like, if I'm trying to get something done, I have to do everything that I can possibly manage. And then if it's still not working, I'm like, fine, I'll call someone.
Yeah, it's the last resource piece of phoning for help. For me personally, when I'm running equipment, if there's a funny noise, that is when I immediately stop, because I think to myself, if this breaks, I don't know how to fix it. But I have to be dang sure that when I make that phone call, I can accurately depict what noise was being made, because if not, I'm going to be sitting there for a long time waiting for somebody to come listen to this noise that was probably nothing. But no, the asking for help piece, I think, and it's whether it's a physical labor job or whether it's, an inside job of, if you're not emotionally doing okay, I think that's really hard for people in agriculture too. So I just am excited to read your books. You've sold me on reading them. I would say I'm more of what kind of reader am I? Probably something that I can't say out loud here on the podcast or people would judge me. But for the listeners who would like to know more about your books or where they can find them, where can they find them?
I sell signed copies, paperbacks, through my website, sequoiahbranham.com, but you can also find them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere for ebooks. In the Company of Cows is also an audiobook. I'm still working on that for In Between Pastures.
That's amazing. Did you record the audiobook yourself?
I did.
That's a lot of work.
It is. My voice kind of sounded like this just for a different reason.
That's awesome. And I love a good audiobook that's spoken by the author, because you get the passion and what you were feeling behind those words when you said them. So that's great. And I will link all of those in the show notes so people can find the book and grab a copy for themselves. Let's talk more about what you do when you're not writing now. What is your full-time job?
Well, that's a loaded question. I just kind of pieced my life together, a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So I do a lot with my books. I would say that's kind of my primary thing. I also worked for the Author Conservatory that I graduated from, so I'm working with students there. And then right now I'm not anywhere steady on the ranch. I get to float around and help my dad and uncles and cousins and my boyfriend just wherever they're at when they need help. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Having that flexibility as a creative, I think, is super important. And it takes a while to figure out where like the happy medium is. I know for me, when I started the podcast, it was very much like off the side of my desk. It was between fields. Like I had to figure out like when I was going to sleep because I wanted to be sitting here working. And then when it kind of got bigger and it became more of my actual full-time job on top of all the speaking and whatever else that I do, then the farming almost came like the part-time job for me, which was sad because I quit my real job so I could drive a tractor because it was fun. So
Yes.
Talk about your experience for riding and training on the ranch. What does that look like for you? What have been some of the biggest challenges for you?
You know, working with young horses or working dogs is so fun for me. It works out pretty well with my dad and I because he really likes to take them, once they kind of know the basics, that first month or so, then he's game on. He really likes that. Whereas I'm like, I love the groundwork. I love that initial stage. And then once they're ready to go outside, like put 60 days on them and then I'll take them back. There's a big jump between like, okay, we've like ridden them in the arena or the big water lot and now we're going outside. And I'm like, I would be okay if I didn't do that. But those initial groundwork and halter breaking and all that, just I feel like you get to see so clearly in front of you them changing and them understanding what you're asking of them, and they're coming around to realize that you're their friend and that you're working with them, not against them. And definitely for young horses, and I think young dogs are very similar. You can see when it starts to click if they understand a command, and they still run in there and do what they're not supposed to, but you can also kind of see they're like, oh, I wasn't supposed to do that. And so I just like seeing them evolve.
What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced growing in this industry as a young woman?
I would say myself is probably the biggest challenge. I've been very blessed that the places I go in, day work and different things like that, 9 out of 10 times, everybody there is so accepting that, I am a girl and doing what they do. And on the off chance that they're not, it's not really they're not rude. It's mostly just this kind of uncertainty, I guess, of like, oh my gosh, you're a girl. Like, I don't know if I'm supposed to shake your hand or like not. It's like, what do I do with the fact that you're a girl? And so, even in that, it's not I've had bad experiences. It's just different. But I think I'm probably my biggest challenge is getting out of my own head and not taking that of like, oh my gosh, I'm a girl. Like, they don't want me here. Or either falling in the ditch of I'm a girl, so I have to like work twice as hard and do twice as much to prove that I'm like capable of being here. But then also not getting in my own head when there are jobs that, they're like, hey, like, we got this, like, you go do the other job. And that's, just not taking it personally. I think most men in agriculture, but specifically cowboys, are known to be very chivalrous and, respectful and very much a gentleman, which has been my experience with them and just everyone that I work with. And so that's just, it doesn't happen super often, but sometimes they will be like, sit this one out. And that's really where it comes from is, just them them being a gentleman and understanding that, of the jobs that we have to do, this is probably the riskiest one. And so, like, we'll handle it and you don't have to.
Yeah. And I agree with what you said. Like, a lot of it comes down to, I would say, the old cowboy culture of being, I'm going to do this for you, little lady, and you can sit this one out. And, it comes with pros and cons for each, right? But in saying that, I think the being in your own head is something that a lot of women in agriculture struggle with, and women that I talk to, myself included, of looking at whether it's on a horseback or it's in a combine or whatever it is, like that mental piece saying like, this is huge. Like, should I even be here doing this? That's a big barrier that a lot of us face.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the toughest ones to overcome, because it's like, you can't see it. It's inside you. So like, how do you even fight that sometimes?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. I had a counselor tell me one time, a long time ago, the thoughts that you're having in your head, like, is that true? Did somebody actually verbally say that to you? Or is it just something that you're thinking? And framing it that way helps me get through those, like, I always call it the mean girl in my head. Like, it helps me get past those mean girl thoughts. So are there any funny or memorable experiences that you've had on the ranch that you're not too embarrassed or proud to share with us?
So many. Yeah. I feel like I'm probably I'm like part-time just humor entertainment for everybody else.
I feel the same way.
I guess, somebody has to be, right?
Yeah.
First thing that came to mind, it was maybe the first time that I had went to help my Uncle Brazos, which is the inspiration for Uncle Ian in my books. But definitely, I think one of the first few times that I was the only one there. It wasn't a full crew. And so we were just picking up some calves that hadn't been gathered the first time. And so we jumped a bunch and we're driving out to the pens, and a couple, a pair and maybe, an extra calf or something, turned back and I went with them. But because of the brush and like the little draws and stuff, I was always just like neck and neck with them. I never could get in front of them and turn them. And all I could hear in my head the whole time that we're going is my dad, who was like, don't quit. Like, don't leave them. Like, you always come back with them. And so I just kept going and going and going. And like, we went past where we had even started with them. And finally I was like, I'm going to lose him and not even know where he and the rest of the cattle went, like, if I keep going. And I was like, and I did finally get them turned a couple of times, and it just like, they would not. They were so bent on going the direction they wanted to go. And so finally I called it, and I was like, you know what, if it's wrong, it's wrong, but we're just calling it and we're doing it and we're going back. And so I looked up, and it wasn't very far to the pins by that time, and we got him pinned, and he was like, what happened to you? He was like, I thought you were like upside down in a ditch somewhere. And I was like, no, I just went like all the way back to the fence with them. And he's like, you could have make one good effort. And when you first had them turned, if they weren't committed, like, you could have came back. And I was like, okay, noted. I'll take that with me going forward. But yeah, I was like, I don't know. That's what I've always been told. Like, stay committed.
Right, exactly. Don't give up. Keep going. Keep going. You always remember those like key pivotal like first pieces of advice for everything. My key first piece of advice was don't hit anything. So that is what I think of all of the time. And I have to be honest with you, this past harvest was the first time I, quote, hit anything. And I was so embarrassed. I was so upset because I hit something. It literally caused like a cosmetic little ding. It wasn't a big deal. Nothing got broken. But I will never forget that I actually hit something, 7 years in now. And I was just like, damn it. Like, I was number one employee for so long for not hitting anything. Oh, man. Sequoyah, what is next for you? What is on the docket for you?
Yes. Well, I just started working on another book project, hopefully to come out in 2026, kind of when I'm projecting. And then I've got a young horse that is at that point where she needs to go outside. So kind of getting intimidated with that a little bit. But yeah, really hoping to get to ride her a lot this winter and get her geared up for spring works.
Amazing. For someone that's listening that is maybe another young creative or a young horse lover or wannabe rancher that is listening, what advice do you have for them from your lived experience? What advice do you have for them?
I think don't be afraid to ask for help is a big one. There's so many people that are, more than happy to help you and to explain things to you. But with that, do what you can to watch and understand just by watching. So, to at least inform your question, to have maybe a more specific question. My Uncle Brazos was such a detailed person. One of his son's friends had a joke that was like, you can ride by a rock and Brazos will be like, did you know that a snake crawled on that like 2 weeks ago? And just like he picked up on everything. And so that was something that I kind of learned from him. I'm not anywhere as detail oriented as he is, but just picked up from him as far as like, okay, before I go back and tell him like, this is what I found when I was checking waters, what are like 2 extra things that like I can notice and tell him, like what are things that I can check? If this isn't working, what can I check? And so just doing that for your question, to be like, I noticed you did this. Why? Or, like things like that. But just try to get a little bit more specific and learn what you can by just watching. But then follow up and ask questions too.
What advice do you have for the inspiring writer?
Ask for help too, a little bit differently because it is so specific. There's only so much studying you can do of someone else's work before you have to really get feedback on your own. But I guess that would probably be like my caveat to that is get feedback on your own writing as much and as often and as high quality as you can. While your mom loves you, because she loves you, she's going to tell you that your writing is great. So get someone who's a little bit more removed and can tell you that it in fact is great, but these are some areas it can grow.
I love that. That's great advice. My last question for you is, what is the most rewarding part about being a rural woman for you?
That is a good question. I think the things that I learn and appreciate that I can share with other people, whether they're fellow rural people or if there's someone who doesn't understand the life, but just getting to appreciate simpler things and get to share that love for simpler things with other people.
That's good stuff. Simple, to the point. Love it. So good. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. And for the listeners who are listening, and remind us again where we can find your books and where can they connect with you online.
Yes. So best place is my website, sequoiahbranham.com. There's a place to shoot me an email there if you want to chat. I have Instagram and Facebook. Both of them are at Sequoyah Branham. I truthfully am not very active as of the last 4 months or so. So yeah, if you want to chat, best place to do that is through my website. Email me there.
Perfect. And I will link all of those in the show notes so people can find you and connect with you.
Awesome.
Thank you again, Sequoyah, so much for sharing your story with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. This week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast is brought to you by the patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. This amazing group of individuals contribute financially to the Rural Woman Podcast to ensure the stories of women in agriculture hit your earbuds each and every week. Want to join them in supporting the stories of women in agriculture while getting access to extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and other great perks? Head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon.